On this episode of Athletic Training Chat, we have Matt Campbell of Midwest Concussion Clinic and an occupational therapy student that has been working with him, Jalynn Gorman. In this episode, we talk about how they connected and what it's been like working together and what they've learned from each other and how it makes it such an important yet effective grouping and working with concussion patients. Because in this, we're not talking about just student athletes that are suffering from concussive injuries, but just the everyday people and how this multi collaborative interprofessional working relationship is so powerful in helping everyone get back to what they're doing and utilizing everyone's skill sets in order to make sure that the concussion care team is taking care of everything. So it is really an interesting conversation in that regard, and one we really enjoyed, and we hope you do too. As always, we are powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. Please think of them when you're checking out for your sports medicine needs. Seen a lot of stuff coming up with kits lately. They're lined with merit and how well they're built, how durable, and the lifetime warranty is essential, especially for the rough and tumble spring. If you're anything in the Midwest when you're in 80-degree weather one day and snow the next week, having those are a huge asset. But without further ado, please enjoy this episode. Welcome to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. We are on with Matt Campbell for the third time. I think you are now officially the first person that's been on 3 times, so we're doing it there. But talking about concussions, but we'll also have Jalynn Gorman, who is almost completed by the time we recorded this occupational therapy student who has been working with Matt and having some experience, and we'll have them fill that in. But just kind of talking off air, have both picked up a lot of things from each other, which has been awesome. But we're just going to kind of talk some more concussion specific things. Always a big topic, always a hot topic. I just saw the other day that there was an FDA released test for quote unquote concussion, and that was getting dispelled very quickly, thankfully, on the interwebs. But so with that, there's always that. But before we get into things, Jalynn, I'm going to turn it over to you first just to fill in a little bit of your background. And then, Matt, if you just want to give a little update on anything, we'll jump into the questions from there.
Okay, my name's Jalynn, and I am pursuing a doctor's degree in occupational therapy. And I have found a passion in neuro and specifically concussions, which have led me to the Midwest Concussion Clinic here with Matt for 14 weeks, which has been fun so far. I have no idea what I want to do after graduation, but it's okay. I'll figure it out.
Plenty of time.
And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at in life right now.
Fair enough. Matt?
So I am Matt from all the aforementioned stuff. I'm the clinical director and co-founder for the Midwest Concussion Clinic. I've got to talk with Joel quite a bit over the last, we did this first one, 3 years ago? 2.5
Probably.
years ago?
It's been a while. Yeah, COVID.
Yeah, right. So it's been nice. I've been able to run a specific practice that focuses on concussion management, concussion rehabilitation up here in the northeast corner of Fort Wayne, Indiana. We have a wide reach now. We've got about a 2.5-hour radius around us where people will travel in from to kind of come in. We've just eclipsed 730 patients now over 4 years. Coming up on 3.5 years, I guess. So it's been going great. Get a chance to talk to you guys again. Awesome. Jalynn's been doing really well. Number one, she came in as a student voluntarily, which is great. And she continues to come back 10.5, almost 11 weeks later. So we're doing well.
Good to hear. So when we kind of were just talking about doing an update, one of the things that we talked about is the first 48 hours. And there's probably a wide range, and there's some myths that just won't go away, and we'll have a little bit of those as well. But kind of in this first 48 hours, people aren't always necessarily getting to you in the first 48 hours
That would be
for
nice.
a lot of obvious reasons. But what have you found as you've stayed up most currently with everything is the most important for people, athletic trainers, and just otherwise to know in those first 48?
So those first 48 hours are the most crucial when it comes to their overall recovery timeline. We can do a lot of damage in the first 48 hours. We start looking at like life-threatening things are all going to happen within that first 48 hours. So if you're going through and, as athletic trainers, we get to see the injury. We get to be the first line of defense. Being able to educate patients, parents, answer questions is huge, right? March is National Athletic Training Month. It's also National Brain Injury Awareness Month. Like, it's not a coincidence that those two come at the same time, because we're the first line of defense when it comes to the education side of things. That first 48 hours, if we can get somebody to, number one, go through and actually explain what's going on, it gives the patient an idea, a sense of relaxation. A lot of times, especially if we're working with kids, like, they don't care. My head hurts. I don't feel good. You're the one that's telling me I'm bad. I was playing through this and it's no problem, right? We get a lot of like the first 48 hours of not really understanding, number one, that they've actually been injured. It's also, if you start looking at it from a parent perspective, from a support system, family, loved ones, somebody who's in the world with them, their first understanding of concussions is they're not supposed to go to sleep. Keep them awake for 24 hours. That is detrimental to what their recovery timeline looks like. Yeah, we want to make sure that their cognition's intact, that they're able to like keep up with being alert and oriented to place and time for those first 3 hours. But after that, sleep within that first 24 to 48 hours is the most crucial thing you can do. Allow the brain to sleep and heal. If we can go through a strict physical, mental, cognitive rest in the first 48 hours, the research tells us that recovery timelines go down significantly. That if someone stays into their normal kind of routines for that first 48 hours, the neurometabolic cascade that's going on underneath the underlying injury is causing problems. We're stimulating people, we're draining energy stores that the brain doesn't have. We're essentially delaying the actual recovery process. If we can take the first 48 hours to sit and relax and kind of take it easy. The old school treatment approach of sitting in a dark room, that first 48 hours is pretty crucial for that aspect of things. Outside of 48 hours, I'm sure we'll touch on later, but that first 48 hours is tough. It's also where we want to limit the most electronics. The whole world is electronics now, right? Their phones, their computers, the TVs, like school is all electronics. My free time's all on electronics. Your escapes from reality are all electronics. Keeping somebody off electronics during concussion recovery is, I'll be honest with you, it's impossible. Nobody's going to do it. None of our patients do it. So we go through the whole process of, we're going to teach you how to do it because we know you're going to. But if we can limit that first 48 hours to, as much as possible, ideally none, we can really start to improve the overall concussion trajectory timelines.
Kind of going to our next kind of myths or, misconceptions of things. Jalynn, I kind of wanted to turn it over to you. Coming in, I don't know what occupational therapy, school teaches you around concussion. I've never been, and I haven't worked with that many close, but from what you've known about them and now spending this last 10 plus weeks, working with Matt, are there things that you were, thought were kind of things, but maybe have been kind of dispelled as myths in quotes, if you will, or, things that surprised you as you've kind of learned your way through?
Yeah, so in school, they don't really talk much about concussions. They kind of do maybe a 5-10 minute segment, and then they go into more of like the traumatic brain injuries that you would see like an inpatient and that are more like severe, I guess.
Sure.
So going into this capstone project with Matt, I only had the knowledge from like my previous concussions in high school and college soccer, and then the very little education I got in grad school about concussions as well. And then it was your most basic, like you bruise your brain, like make sure you rest, don't stress yourself, it's going to be okay. I mean, that's pretty much all they really talk about. So then going with Matt and learning the complete opposite of everything I've ever learned my entire life about concussions has just been mind-boggling. So kind of trying to like retrain my brain almost to learn what a concussion truly is and how it truly does affect an individual. And speaking on top of that too, a rotation in an inpatient setting right before this, and we would see concussion patients pretty frequently because I was on the trauma unit, trauma floor, and we would give them a brochure and say, go home and rest and good luck. And that's it. And so coming here and seeing like, no, that's not how it needs to be. There's so much more you can do. It's kind of frustrating that I wish I would have done capstone first so I could have been a bigger impact on those people's lives.
For sure.
It's such an interesting world.
Go ahead.
It's really like we start looking at other specialties. You hear that story a lot. Oh, we got a 10-minute segment. We got a 5-minute segment. Even from the athletic training world, we spend like a week maybe on what concussions really are. And we're both getting old. It's been a couple years since we've been certified. So, when we went through the initial education on concussions, sit in a dark room, rest, you'll get better. Well, that changed 3 years ago, but we still get athletic trainers that come in that, well, concussions aren't like, I get conversations from healthcare workers all over the place. Like, what are you doing? You're selling snake oil. It's like, no, read any article that's come out since 2018 and it'll tell you what we're doing and why we're doing it. It's such a challenge in the world to change the narrative around concussions. I mean, there aren't very many not-for-profit organizations based around the ACL tears. There aren't very many, like, there's really, yeah, I'm sure there is some sort of ACL repair month, like, or ACL repair day, where it's a national awareness for patients that have gone through it. But, all of these things exist around brain injuries and concussions because you've got such a divisive feeling towards they're no big deal or you're dying, right? There's really no in between. You get people brought into the spectrum that they come in and why am I here? Why would I do this? I'm 17 years old. I just bounced my head off a ski rail and I want to go back to work. Why can't I do that? It's like, well, that's tough. And then you get the other side of it is, I fell and hit my head on the car door and now I've got chronic CTE and my life's over. It's like, well, at 12 years old, probably not, man. But we have to be able to educate that, things in our clinic that we've talked about lately is we've now opened it up to any age because we've gotten enough phone calls from parents of kids who've been diagnosed with concussions that they go, well, what am I supposed to do with my 6-year-old? Let him be a kid, but there's so many questions that go out. It's like, what do we do? So that was something that when we started, we set an age at 12 and then the age went to 10 and then the age went to 8. And now I've gotten enough phone calls from 6-year-olds over the last couple of days. It's like, all right, anybody that wants to come in, we'll see them because you can at least go through the education side.
Right.
And a lot of it is as a parent, calm nerves, right? Well, they told me my kid has a concussion. What does that mean?
Right.
I don't know. They just said he has a concussion. And now I go to the internet and the internet says he's going to die. So now what do I do?
So, yeah, I think it highlights such a kind of double-edged sword of the profession and just any of the professions. Just there's so much to know and like finding those specialists or the information you can, or, finding the people that can kind of summarize that down to stay up to date because it is so hard to do it. I know every time we talk, I learn something. I don't work with it, concussions that closely anymore, but that was one thing I was fortunate enough when I was working at a university, we had somebody on staff. Concussion was, their interest. And so they could generally keep us up to date and we would just utilize them. But yeah, that's tough to keep on it and, making sure. Wanted to hit on any other myths or things you kind of come around, especially around that, again, people hear concussion is not always explained extremely well. And yes, with the internet and you see what's happening on pro football and, with people getting concussions and that's the media narrative. And then there's some segments about it, good, bad, or otherwise, other myths that you find that you have to commonly dispel.
So I think the biggest one that we have to commonly dispel, and Jalynn, you can chime in if I'm wrong here, is that there's no magic number. I mean, we get kids that come in all the time going, "Oh, I've had 3 concussions, I'm done forever." Like that's not the case at all. I mean, we've eclipsed 700 patients and we've medically disqualified 7 of 700, right? It doesn't happen very often. Two of the 7 that we disqualified were less than 3 concussions. So it's like, we don't have a magic number. Going through and not reporting things because there's a magic number out there, that's not it at all. It's that's only going to lead to kids not reporting symptoms. That's only going to lead to kids causing problems. Like if they come in going, I'm never going to play my sport again. What does that do psychologically to a kid?
Right.
Like going in and going, wow, somebody told me I have an injury, which I have a headache and I'm dizzy, but I've been playing through it for 6 weeks, and then they come in here and go, well, you're going to tell me that I can't play anymore. So why would I be honest to you? Right. Why would I sit here and actually tell you how I feel? Because you're going to try to tell me I can't play. That myth is one of the most detrimental that we have, is the magic number, the fact that we're trying to medically disqualify everybody. No, I want people to play just as much as you. I'm competitive. If you get better faster, it looks better on my numbers, number one, from a research standpoint. Number two, it makes it look like we know what we're doing. But that's not necessarily the case. Not everybody gets better quickly. Some people get better really quick. Some people, we don't get better really quick. And then Jalynn, do you have anything to add to that? Because I know I talk a lot, number one, but I do want your input, because this is new. Like, this whole thing is new to you. I've been doing this, and the clinic's almost 4 years old now, but at the same time, I've been doing nothing but focusing on concussions for the last 8 of them. So
I guess I could be a testimonial and say that I was that athlete.
Yep.
And I could probably never, I don't know, I probably count on 2 hands how many concussions I had. And I could tell you that I I never reported one of them, not one. So through college and everything, I never reported a single concussion, because in my eyes, as a college athlete, I have a concussion, I'm out for the season. So I was like, I'm going to suck it up. I'm going to deal with the headache. I'm going to deal with all the other consequences of it. And then I'm going to like keep playing, because that's what was most important to me, which have kind of led me to this project now. Because now that I've graduated and I'm done with sports and I see how dumb that was, I realize that there needs to be more education about, like, just because you have a concussion doesn't mean that you're out for the season, doesn't mean that your life is over. Like, there's things that you can do, and not a lot of people know about that.
Totally agree with you there.
Yeah, like if we think about what the job and the role of the athletic trainer is, right? We're the very first line of healthcare for a lot of student athletes. Like, a lot of people have never seen a doctor. Like, I went to the doctor when I was a kid when I got sick, but like,
Sure,
who's gone through that process before? So if you start looking at the healthcare world, especially for the younger athletes, like, where does the education come from? Well, we've all done preseason meetings. Jalynn, you've been through preseason meetings. You know what they are. Okay, get this paperwork done. In that paperwork, there's a paper that says, oh, if I have symptoms, I'm going to report something. They started a campaign a couple years ago where it's like, see something, say something, and goes through and educates teammates. That's a not-for-profit organization talking about the importance of like recognizing concussion symptoms in your friends. It's something that we all gloss over. And I did the same thing. We baseline tested everybody. We talked about, oh, if you get a headache or you get dizzy, you should say something, but we didn't talk about what the importance of it was. Now that concussions are getting more and more of a spotlight shown on them, we need to make sure that as athletic trainers, we're being, the part, that front line that sits there and says, okay, look, this is what they are. If you have an athletic trainer that comes in and says, hey, concussions are no big deal, we're going to sit here, we're going to rest, and a couple of days we're going to clear you to go back to play, that's a problem, because now something goes on down the road, they come in to see me. Okay, so what do you know? Oh, it's no big deal. Oh, well, now we have to spend a lot of time talking about what's really going on and not necessarily what you've been told.
Right.
And Jalynn's seen it. There are patients that come in and goes, why would I care? Right? Why am I doing all of this? We get it a lot from like parents, like, okay, is this really a big a deal as you're saying? Yeah. You can get new shoulders and new elbows, you can get new knees, you can get new lungs and heart, but you can't get a new brain. So you have to be able to protect that, because it's the only thing you have to have with you until the very end. You may be able to get a chip and all that at some point, but not now.
Yep, I've used that argument before.
Yeah.
Kind of speaking of staying up on things, aerobic exercise and how it fits in trying to get mix it in with concussion rehab. I remember even in my undergrad, that was becoming like the newer thing, and what was it, the Buffalo graded
the Buffalo
test. Then
test.
I will now plead ignorance on that. Like, from there, I haven't done a whole lot with it, so my knowledge on this recently is none, to say the least. So just kind of even just the update on that for anybody listening of where aerobic fits in, how soon, when, what are you looking for, would be great.
Do you want to take it, Jalynn?
You got it.
So the aerobic exercise, right? We talked about the first 48 hours, importance of kind of staying laying low and going through the whole sit and wait approach in that first 48 hours.
Yep.
After that, aerobic exercise is actually one of the best friends we have. So if we start to look at what occurs during a concussion, we get a reduced blood flow to the brain, right? So there's a reduced blood flow into that blood-brain barrier that brings the nutrients into the brain, that flushes out the waste products from the cells. The easiest way to increase blood flow, just like anything else, is to increase the heart rate, right? How do we increase the heart rate? We go through aerobic exercise. So the implementation of what we call subsymptomatic aerobic exercise. The easiest way to determine where the heart rate level and what exercise tolerance we have is what's called the Buffalo Concussion Treadmill Test, or there's a modified version for the Buffalo Concussion Bike Test. It is a way for us to establish a subsymptomatic threshold heart rate, a subsymptomatic threshold duration of exercise tolerance for patients. Gives us an idea on where their heart rate is and what timing worth of aerobic exercise we have to monitor where symptoms increase. Now, if you don't have the time, the resources, the money to put into the Buffalo Concussion Treadmill Test, it's really relatively easy to do. It's a heart rate monitor and a treadmill that you can control. But if you don't have them, you go through and you talk about, okay, look, we're going to start lightweight aerobic exercise, right? Going out and going for a walk, some light body weight lifting, some jogging. There's some real research that's being done right now on like sport specific tasks done slowly. So one of the things is shooting free throws. We do a lot with like bouncing racquetballs and tennis balls, going through and doing something that requires a little bit more fine motor skill to the aerobic exercise is a way that the brain goes through and kind of reattaches and reconnects some of the neurons that get broken post-injury. But the easiest way to like establish where symptomatic threshold is you get them to rate their symptoms on that 0 to 6 or 0 to 10 scale. You sit down and say, okay, headache on a 0 to 10 is a 4. If it goes to a 6, I want you to stop. Set a timer for 5 minutes, go walk for 5 minutes. And once that timer goes off, I want you to stand and focus on, deep belly breathing or extended nasal breathing and, just trying to get your system a chance to let your heart rate come down, right? We're trying to stimulate blood flow, increase the heart rate goes up. Parasympathetic relaxation techniques, heart rate comes down, increase the heart rate comes down. We're playing around with, the ability to control, number one, control our autonomic system post-injury, but number two, it's to stimulate blood flow. So going through the aerobic exercise, as long as we're not increasing symptoms more than 2 points on that 0 to 10 scale, we're doing well. The hard part we all run into with athletes, with people, that you meet in your day-to-day life, if I tell you to work out for 10 minutes, you're going to work out for 20. So you have to be able to talk about the importance of why we're not increasing symptoms, why we're controlling the amount that we're doing, and actually getting a patient to understand that it's not just because we want you to go work out. Yeah, that's great. That's not why we do it. A lot of times yoga is one of the best things that we can do. We've partnered with a company called Zen Lab Indy that has created kind of like concussion specific yoga under our direction. She sat down and Kristen put together a group of like sitting in a chair and doing things that avoid like certain head hanging positions to help with balance, coordination, core stability, respiration control, and aerobic exercise in a controlled fashion. So it's something that's very easily done. And, the patients that will admit to doing aerobic exercise get better a lot faster. The patients that don't struggle with the depression side of things, struggle with the lack of energy and the lack in, physical and cognitive fatigue, they tend to take a little bit longer to recover.
Trying to figure out which route I want to go with this. Let's go to return to learn just so we make sure we kind of cover this one, because I think it's a huge one. But then I would really like to focus on, because we've got both of you, that concussion care team and what we've learned, and by we I mean you guys, and how that's all worked out for there. Yeah.
Third time, man. We're team now.
Seriously, might as well at this point. The official podcast of Midwest Concussion Clinic.
That's right.
We'll get you your own someday. It's coming.
I don't know about that.
So return to learn and its importance, working through it with other stakeholders. I know loosely from the NCAA, because I'm sure it's evolved in my just short time of not being with it is that was a big push. It's something that we were able to put in at the university we were at. We ran into our own things. Thankfully, our faculty was pretty good. We could run it through like the student support side, but
Yep.
technically they couldn't force a faculty to adjust anything, but it was just that
Correct.
secondary backup to the student athlete, letting the professor know that they were having an issue. We would follow up, we'd provide updates every few days, on how things were going. So it kind of helped close a loop, which I think a lot of the professors ended up appreciating, and it also helped the student kind of get back. But if you could just kind of the importance of it, how you guys have approached that and worked with different stakeholders, kind of the whole overview.
Yeah. So return to learn is just as important as anything else, right? So we're looking at, you've got an injury that affects cognitive function. I am somebody who on my end thinks it's actually unfair to test somebody while they have a concussion, because number one, you're not testing them, you're testing their brain injury, or
Sure.
two, you're testing their ability to guess, right?
Sure,
I get
that
to
makes
a
sense.
point of the test, I get all the way through it, I am now, my batteries are out, I'm running on empty and fumes, and I'm essentially guessing so I can go home and lay down.
Yeah.
So what we did is we've adapted very similar to like the NCAA's. We've got a 5-step, kind of return to learning protocol that just looks at different attendance processes. We implement it with anybody that comes into our clinic that's still in school, whether it's a college age athlete, non-athlete, an adult going through and doing online classes. My 6th grader that's, in kindergarten right now, we talk about doing some things with some attendance relaxation and things like that. But we want to kind of control, number one, we want to control like physical stimulus. So being in a classroom, being in school, they can all cause symptom overload. So if somebody's on, early on in their recovery, things aren't going well, we may put modifications to, hey, you can only be here 3 days a week. You can only be here 5 days a week, half days. You can come half days, Tuesday, Thursday, full days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, to kind of play that fine line between sitting around and not doing anything and keeping their routines as much as we can without overstimulating. The biggest caveat we start with, and I'll be completely transparent in the clinic, with most patients, we start with what we call zone 4, which is full class attendance with extra time to do homework, extra time for tests, alternate exam schedules if needed. And then the biggest caveat is attendance is tolerated. That, if you're struggling one morning, stay home, try to go in the afternoon. If you're like, I wake up and I'm miserable today, try to stay home from class, take a class off, go to the afternoon class, try to balance them around and play that route. I have found that in the clinic, it's really easy for athletes to get athletic, like to get the academic accommodations, right? Whether it's at the high school level, at the college level, it's really easy for athletes. You talked about it. Your university went through and put in return to learn into place that you guys are involved in. What about my non-athletes that have come in? I've worked with, at this point, I've worked with IU, Ball State, Purdue, Fort Wayne, Grace, Taylor, St. Francis, Trine, Huntington, and then doing a little bit with like Anderson right now and IUPY of like, what do we do now with students that come in that are non-athletes? I had a student recently who was hit by a car. Okay, great. What does that mean? Well, we pulled him out of school for the 2 weeks because he's got a spring break coming up. So we're going to take him out of school. We're going to keep him off and kind of get what benefits we can. And right now he's got a professor that doesn't understand why he can't do a completely online 3D architectural model for a class. Okay.
Piece of cake.
Yeah, so that's what I said. He told me about it. I was like, what does that mean? Like, I got 3D, we're good. I understand that. It's gonna make me sick. But so trying to implement return to learn for non-athletes is challenging. We go through student-centered services. We treat it as like the academic support team. We tell them to put together a list of their faculty members, give me their academic advisor's number, email address, so we can start opening communication lines that way. And I tell every patient that goes through our clinic, I will 100% be an advocate for you for any academic or work restrictions that we have in place. If they're giving you a hard time, don't waste your energy, effort, batteries to do it yourself. Let me step in and help you. That's what I'm here for, right? I'm here to help patients with everything. If they're getting pushback, that's going to cause stress. If they're worried about missing class or missing assignments, that's going to cause stress. Stress is going to cause an increased release of cortisol in the body. It's going to cause upper cervical tightness. It's going to cause increase to, the overall heart rate. And we're trying to calm all of that down and regulate all that. The brain doesn't heal when it's stressed. So if we can implement the important return to learn protocols into place for everybody, even if they don't use them, they're there if they need them. If they wake up miserable on a Thursday and they've got class that they can only miss twice before they get dropped and they've already missed one, well, guess what? The return to learn protocols are in place if you need them. If you don't need them, don't use them. But we don't want patients to worry about class rank. We don't want patients to worry about overall GPA, scholarship positioning on a short-term injury basis. In the grand scheme of things, even if it's, a year recovery, 2 years recovery, there's some permanent changes that happen. It's still short-term in the grand scheme, right? And I don't know, you've been going to school forever. Jalynn's been in school forever. So like there are lifelong people that do, school for the rest of their lives. But for most of us, school is a small snapshot in time, right?
For sure.
Even if it's 12 years in the grand scheme of an 80-year life is a small snapshot in time. But to be able to use those protocols in place when you need them is vital to like the psychological aspect of a patient's recovery. You're not out on an island by yourself.
Makes complete sense. The concussion care team. Again, kind of just talking about it. I don't remember if we were on record or not anymore, but Matt had made comments, just from his eyes being opened up to what OT can bring to the table, and now sending some people out for some other things that, maybe aren't necessarily in your wheelhouse or area of expertise in the big picture. So maybe Matt, let's start with you and just where you've seen that, and define that concussion care team, and then how OT has been it, and then Jalynn, just kind of piggybacking on top of that, where you've seen it fit in, and from your experiences in other roles and other clinical settings, how that all plays a factor.
So nobody can know everything. I can't stress that enough, right? There are a ton of things in the concussion world that I don't know. I can tell you if I don't know it, when you ask, I'm figured out, right? And that's part of the obsession side of things when it comes to the brain injury aspect. But nobody can treat anybody alone, and that's the hard part with medicine. If you look at medicine, whether it's ego driven, whether it's insurance driven, whatever the reason, it is I'm going to get you better, and when I get you better, you can go back to play. If I can't get you better, well, we got you as good as you're ever going to get. And that's a problem with medicine. If there's somebody that comes into my clinic and we try our therapy world and it's like, hey, I'm not getting any better, it's not working. Guess what? I'm going to try to figure out how to get you better and find somebody who can do it better than I can. I get patients that email, that call, that DM all the time of like, hey, I'm dealing with an injury in Phoenix, or I'm dealing with an injury in St. Louis. Like, I had a patient who they wanted to drive up from St. Louis, Missouri the other day. I mean, that's an 8-hour round, like each direction drive, because they aren't getting help anywhere else. It's like, hold on, let me try to find somebody down in your world to help you out. So, in a perfect situation, and this is kind of a peek behind the curtains on what I want the Midwest Concussion Clinic to eventually become, is it's multiple specialties that need to treat concussions that focus on treating concussions, not other things, right? Therapy for concussions has been around forever, right? That's one of the specialties of OT. That's one of the specialties of physical therapy and vestibular therapy is, hey, I know how to treat concussions. Okay. You may know how, but do you? Because we see it a lot. We'll send somebody off, from a workers' comp standpoint, or somebody with an insurance that I can't bill, or location wise, they need to go somewhere else to make it easier. They treat the cervical spine. Okay, great. But you got to treat the brain also. You can't just treat the cervical spine.
Right.
We can't just treat the brain. We got to treat the autonomic system. We got to treat the hormone system. We got to treat, the cognitive function. We got to treat psychologically. So an ideal concussion care team would consist of the patient, the parents, the support staff, whether it's husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, grandma, grandpa, family member, whatever it is, And then a host of specialties, like our medical director, Dr. Lazoff, is a physiatrist who specializes in, the nervous system of the body. He's been treating concussions forever. We have patients that do go the neurology route. The neurology route and concussions tend to be like, everybody goes, well, that's where they should go. Well, neurology looks at a lot of other things that concussions may or may not register on the radar of importance to them. Where physiatry, they're the ones from a medical standpoint, from a med school standpoint, training standpoint, they are the most trained to treat concussions. So they're kind of like athletic trainers when we come to our education level. They get a much more in-depth education surrounding concussions than neurology does, because it's their wheelhouse. Right. And then we look at the therapies. A perfect world would consist of like a vestibular therapist, a physical therapist or occupational therapy, speech therapy, and then some form of cognitive behavioral therapy, whether it's like a trauma therapy or a PTSD response. I tell patients all the time, and Jalynn can attest to this. I am a lot of marriage counseling. I am a lot of psychological just reassurance, like, hey, look, yeah, that's what's going on. Yep, you know it. Yep, you got it. You're doing well. Keep doing what you're doing. But it's a part of the whole recovery that nobody can do it all by themselves. And I am very quick to like, hey, I need somebody else's eyes. I've got a vision therapist that we can send to that if they're not doing well with some of the basic vision therapy stuff I am, hey, I'm hitting things from a concussion perspective. Let's hit something from a non-concussion, like just overall body system, approach to it. And that's where the partnership with Jalynn and the Huntington University's occupational therapy department makes sense, because they have a huge role into it now that I actually know what all. In full disclosure, before Jalynn started, she reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm an occupational therapy student. I went, okay, I know what that is. And then she and I went, okay, what is occupational therapy?
Right.
Okay, all right, I got it now. Like this
You're
whole
not
conversation.
the only one.
This
Everybody
conversation
thinks I
makes
help
sense.
people find jobs, so it's fine.
It's right. It's like athletic training. We make people lift and do that. It's like, that's not what we do, right? We
Hydration
can.
engineers.
Yeah, correct. I'm good at telling people off and squirting Gatorade into a mouth.
Yes.
Like, can't tell you the last time I've done that.
Lots of years of schooling.
Yeah. So Jalynn, why don't you talk about like the occupational therapy role and kind of what you've seen from the approach to it?
Yeah, so whenever I was developing my capstone, it's kind of free reign as long as you focus on occupational therapy and you're going to benefit in the long run. So I was like brainstorming, and I kind of like settled on, oh, well, whenever I was a college athlete and I got all these concussions, I had no one to help me. And I struggled with more than just the athletic side of it. I struggled with like getting up, socializing with my friends, going to the grocery store, stuff like that. So whenever I went to OT school and I started this capstone project, I found Matt, and I realized that OT has such a big gap when it comes to concussions. Like we learn a little bit about it, but we don't really engage much with it. So I developed this project, and then I did my fieldwork rotations. And my first one was an outpatient therapy clinic where I worked with both. Well, I chatted with an OT, but I also got to work along with PTs. Anything concussion based went straight to PTs. Like OTs didn't see anything. But after learning more about these like patients, I learned that they are struggling with more than just like their vestibular and I don't know, their vision and everything. It's about their day-to-day life. So working with Matt, I've talked to a lot of patients so far, and they're like, I get in the shower and I'm dizzy and I'm gonna fall. Okay, well, that's right down my road. Like I can tell you everything about showering and safety, adaptive equipment, like assistive technology, all that fun stuff. And then they're like, well, I'm going through my daily routine and I forget, like I forget where I'm going, or I don't remember to brush my teeth in the morning and stuff like that. And that's where OT needs to play such a big role with concussion management, because these people, yes, it's more than just like balance and vision and stuff. Their day-to-day life is disrupted whenever you get a concussion. And that's where OT's scope is. So I focus on ADLs, which is activities of daily living. And that essentially is like anything and everything you do each day. So like cooking a meal preparation, bathing, dressing, cleaning, all that fun stuff. And I think that part has been neglected as far as like concussion management for so long. So that's kind of how I found this niche, and I want to grow the role with occupational therapy and concussion management because there's just endless amount of opportunity when it comes to it.
Absolutely.
if you think about everything that we've talked about, right, from the return to learn process, the aerobic exercise process, myths and concussions, the occupational therapy role, the ADL adjustments, we get 45 minutes to an hour. You're expecting that to be all done in that time frame, and a patient to go, yeah, got it all. Now you had a patient that's struggling with cognitive and cognitive performances. They're struggling with comprehension and short-term memory and long-term memory, and we're having all of these conversations and going, okay, look, this is what's going on. This is what we're going to do. This is what we need. We're going to bounce here. You're going to do this. And oh, by the way, when you get dizzy in the shower, this is what you're going to do. So by sitting down, and part of Jalynn's caption project, and she can touch on a little bit more, is she's put together a bunch of like take homes, right? Handouts, infographics on different areas of what patients tend to struggle with post-injury that are going to be really beneficial. Number one, she lets me use them. So when she's gone and, rich and doing all her stuff somewhere else, I'm going to use these forever because I can. And two, when she's in an inpatient setting, when she's in a trauma unit, when she's working outpatient, when she's doing community outreach, she has these available. Nobody cares about concussions until you have one, or until you're dealing with somebody who's had one. So if I'm going out and doing community outreach, it's like, hey, check out these sweet handouts that we have. Nobody cares. They want the sunglasses that were underneath. They want the pens or the stickers that we had. Nobody goes through it. But when you get a patient in the door, it's like, hey, we've talked about a ton of stuff. By the way, Jalynn put together a bunch of these things for you to take home that go through, and hey, I'm struggling with showering. I'm struggling with things that as patients, when you're meeting somebody new, you may not talk about. I'm struggling when I go to the bathroom, like me going number 2, all of a sudden I get really dizzy and nauseous. We've talked about certain things with like, nobody touches on concussions and sexual intercourse. Like, what do you do in that situation? What do you do when somebody who's going through strenuous exercise, like some adult routines? What do you do in that situation? Nobody talks about it. So by being able to sit down and educate a patient on something, whether it's personable, in person, with a handout, through a podcast, through video, that a patient can go through and listen to after the fact, it's huge. It's one of those things that often gets overlooked in the ADL side of things, which is, prime occupational therapy world. Like, that's not all they do, but at the same time, yeah, I can talk to somebody about going through and modifying certain things in their house. But one of the scopes of occupational therapy is they can actually go out to houses, right? They can do home visits. They can go through and say, hey, look, this throw rug that's beautiful right now that you've tripped over 6 times in the last 3 days, it's got to go for right now. But when we talk about it in the clinic, it's like, hey, you may trip going up the stairs. I have no way of saying, all right, you got to modify that. You got to go through. And when they come in next week going, yeah, I was walking through the door frame and I ran into the door and now all of a sudden my arm's bruised up. It's like, yeah, well, what did you trip over? Like, that's something occupational therapy can go through, right? That's something they can do. And it's the collaborative effort is so important, and the communication between providers is what is huge. The reason I want to bring it in-house and have everybody in one location is, if I have a problem, I walk down the hall and talk to Dr. Lazoff. Like, hey, doc, this is what I'm seeing. This is what's going on. We can make adjustments to medications in real time, right? Hey, somebody's got a suboccipital headache. They've got, they've done occipital blocks before. Great, let's do an occipital nerve injection today. Get it done in the office. From a speech therapy, from a physical therapy, if I've got coordinated care with somebody, takes 4 days to get treatment notes. I've seen them twice in that time frame. Now I've got two times to figure out, hey, what did they do with you in physical therapy that made you feel like you're going to throw up?
Right.
Okay, great. You don't remember either? All right, let me go to the notes in 2 days to figure out what we were supposed to do yesterday. And vice versa. If they're doing something in the clinic that's making them feel nauseous, they go to PT and the PT's like, well, what'd you do over there? Well, I tossed a tennis ball up and down. Okay, great. Let's work on your neck and let's work on that. It's like, okay, we've got to be able to talk.
For sure.
I can't tell you, a lot of times communication's the problem with a lot of people. It's hard for everybody's schedule, like mine included. It's hard for me to call to another outreach PT clinic and say, hey, look, let's talk, because I'm in between patients. They're in between patients. We're bouncing around. A lot of times, we're chatting through email and doing all this stuff. It's like, all right, the answer to the question that I had on a patient that just left, I got an answer now. But at least we have an answer, where there are some times where you don't get any notes at all from anybody. And that just doesn't work for a team approach.
No, I completely agree with you there. Uh, jump into the AT chat questions, which I'm gonna continue to modify a little bit since
You're
we
good.
got multiple people. So, in general, just kind of the big question is, where do you see concussion care going in the next 5 to 10 years? And then Matt, obviously from the athletic training realm, Jalynn from the OT realm, if you want to kind of fill that in, we'll go with that.
Right now our clinic's it's an anomaly, right? We are new. We are trying to do things in a different way. My thoughts, my hopes is that these types of clinics are not going to be the anomaly. They're happening more and more around. The hard part is anybody can call themselves a concussion clinic, right?
Right.
I didn't have to put any special licensure together that says I know what I'm talking about. We came up with a name. We filed for copyrights and trademarks, and away we went. We registered our business, and then we moved on. Right? We didn't have to do anything.
Yep.
So the clinics, the one-stop shops, are hopefully going to become the norm. From a personal standpoint, like the franchising aspect of things, like that's the whole goal for this, is to have a Midwest concussion clinic and just random location, like up in Wisconsin, just a little bit down the road from La Crosse, maybe somebody that's working with like firefighters and things like that, to put together a clinic and franchise it up there would be.
We'll see if we know a guy. Yeah.
Yeah, just randomly putting things together.
Sure. Sure.
That's the hopes, is these type of things become the norm. Patient care, I can't see everybody. I would love to, don't get me wrong, and I'm trying, but I can't see everybody. So to be able to understand what concussions are, to get the narrative around the injury to change, it's a brain injury. It's not a bruise, right? You have injured the brain. Oftentimes there is no bruise, which another myth there. But, we start talking about, you got to change the narrative, and these types of clinics become the norm.
Yeah, to add to that, for occupational therapy, I hope that we play a larger role. We're such a growing occupation right now, and like I feel like nobody knows what it is, which is fine, whatever. That makes it more fun for me to advocate. But I hope that we play a larger role with concussions besides just doing like vestibular and vision therapy. Although there's crucial to concussion management and treatment, like we need to take a step back and look at it from a bigger perspective of like, okay, yeah, you're having these issues, but how is this affecting like your bathing, your dressing, and all those ADLs that you're going to do every single day, all day? So I hope that we can implement that more specifically in inpatient therapy. Or yeah, whenever I was shadowing at or doing my clinical rotation at the hospital, it's just kind of like disappointing to see like how big of a gap there truly is with concussion education. And at the specific hospital, like it was all kind of on OT to do the education, which I thought was interesting because a lot of places I feel like they rely on PT, but it was mostly on OT to give this education, like, hey, go home, rest, you'll figure it out essentially. And there needs to be more. Like there needs to be, hopefully Matt's clinic will grow substantially and we can just send people there. But hopefully there's more clinics like that available, more resources available to give those people the next step after they do get out of the hospital. Because I mean, once they get out, they're on their own. And most of them are older adults. They don't even know what a concussion is. They've never heard of it before. So I just want to see OT grow in that field and help people from a bigger perspective.
There's so many similarities between athletic training and occupational therapy. And when it comes to like
sure.
the profession as a whole, right? Nobody knows what we do. They see the towel boy on the sideline squirting a water bottle. And, wow, they get paid $50,000 a year to be a towel boy. It's like, no, that's a licensed healthcare professional who's an assistant who's doing that. But, we start looking at like occupational therapy. As an athletic trainer, we spend all the time going, wow, I can't believe nobody knows what we do. I can't believe after all of this stuff, nobody knows what we do.
Right.
Therapy is not new. Occupational therapy has been around for a long time, but at the same time, they're fighting the same fight we are. Yep. You don't get people jobs. Like that's vocational therapy, by the way. But
I could start a whole podcast on that. Like all the things people say and what they think. Like, oh, you just
that's the component of concussion care too, vocational therapy.
Yep.
But
it's cool. Go ahead.
No, I was just it's talking about, like, that's the reason why I wanted Jalynn to be on this, right?
Yeah,
Is because
absolutely.
she's going through it like we do, right? She's going through trying to carve a niche into what she's doing. She's a new student, so she's ready to, she's ready to tackle the world. And, she's, number one, she's intelligent, so that helps. But two, she's somebody who's passionate enough about what her profession is that she's willing to not fall into a, well, this is my world. This is what I do. I come in and I say, oh, have you gone to the bathroom today? And then we move on. Like, that's not what their job is. Their job is to provide care in such a unique way that they need to be a huge part of what we're doing also from a concussion perspective. Even in the outpatient world, getting somebody to come in and sit down and talk ADLs, we've had a couple of patients now that Jalynn sits down and is like, okay, you're going to go through and you're going to talk to them about everything that they have to know and want to know about their day-to-day stuff. Because that helps me go through, and while you're doing that, I can watch, number one, what you do and how you're doing it, so I can provide valuable feedback to your education. But number two, it allows me to see what an OT does, right? Yep. It allows me to personally see, if I send somebody to OT to talk about ADLs, what are they getting out of it? Not just wow, do you struggle to get dressed in the morning? Me too. Do you struggle to get out of bed in the morning? Yep, me too. And then we move on. Like, we actually provide tangible takeaways.
Yeah, that's the neat thing about OT, is that it's continuing to grow. And honestly, there's so many paths you can go down. The scope is so broad. And like, from home evaluations to whenever you think outpatient, people are like, oh, you do hand therapy. No, there's so much more that you can do with that. And I remember an instance with Matt, patient had upper extremity pain. And he's like, okay, I'll get you into a PT. And I was like, I want to know, like, why do you send them to a PT and not an OT? And he was like, I don't know, it's what I've always done. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Like, as an OT, like, if I was going to explain it in the most layman's term possible, an outpatient, we focus primarily on upper extremity, whereas like PT will do some upper extremity, but they do focus more on like spine and lower. So it's like, it's just interesting to see, like, even somebody in the healthcare world is like, I don't know why I don't send them to an OT. I guess I didn't know that they really focus on upper extremities. I'm like, yeah, I could talk to you about your shoulder, hand, wrist all day long, but like when it comes to lower extremity, I'm not too sure. So educating Matt on that piece and saying like, hey, like, there is more than just referring to PT, and advocating for OTs out there was good.
For sure.
I'm going to tailor this one just to Jalynn, because pretty sure, Matt, we've covered this one at least once, if not twice. And Jalynn, you kind of touched on this earlier when I had the questions, but what advice would you maybe go back and give yourself as a still to be young professional in regards to concussion? If you could go back and be like, you should know about this.
I want to go back and I'd learn a little bit more instead of just Googling or going on TikTok and looking up what a concussion is. There's so much more to it. But I guess I wish I would have branched out more and talked to more people about concussions, because I always, even as a student athlete, like I said, like, I always just thought you bruise your brain, it's going to get better and stuff. But I would tell myself that there's more to it, and to go out and actually do the research yourself and put in the time and effort and realize how much this truly does affect people, everybody, all ages, no matter if you're an athlete, non-athlete. And I think that's a big thing too. The people that I did a whole research on this, like, it's not just athletes that get injured and get concussions. I'd say, like, I don't know what percentage of your patients, Matt, are non-athletes, but it's a large percent.
Majority. Yep,
yeah, and it's just, they slip on ice. A lot of it's older adults, so you get a little bit more imbalance when you get older. And I guess I just go back and tell myself to put in the effort a little bit more, a little bit sooner. And I wish I would have found my passion for concussions a little bit sooner as well too.
So then, following up on that question, Jalynn, we'll start with you. What has been the most influential resource you found so far in your career on concussion?
I have to say it's Matt.
I was gonna say, don't feel obligated to, but
it's not fair because I've already given him 2 compliments this week. He only gets 1 week.
Been a good week.
He gets a big head.
Been a good week.
But I will say it's Matt 100%, because although I've had phenomenal professors throughout my graduate program and they know so much about neuro, they don't know specifically about concussions. Sure. And it's just not prevalent enough to teach in occupational therapy right now, which is why I'm doing this whole thing. But I will say Matt has taught me so much. And sometimes he talks a mile a minute and I'm just like, having a brain freeze because I don't know what the heck he's saying. But then I go home and I like kind of digest everything he says. And I was talking to a friend earlier this week, and I was like, I don't know if I've learned too much in the past like 11 weeks. And they're like, really? I'm like, I don't know. But I realized I have. It's just all application based. So I may not be able to sit there and like ramble on about aerobic exercise or all these concussion techniques and stuff, but like I know how to apply it to a patient now and why it's
Sure.
important.
Mhm.
And I think that's more important than just rambling on facts and stuff.
Yep.
Matt, anything else new you've kind of come across? I know you've shared this before, but is there anything kind of a new resource you've come by, or that you would want to share?
One of the best things available, Jalynn talked about TikTok and going through like some of the stuff that's going on with social media right now, some of the people that are out there in the concussion world that are actually trying to build whether they're building their own concussion platforms like Post Concussion Incorporated. Bella Page is a brain injury warrior that's going through, and she's a non-medical provider that's established like this huge following and like resource based, and there are communities and support groups that you can do, like the Brain Injury Association of America has got support groups and education that's constantly being turned and burned. A couple people that I do want to shout out is Katie Mitchell with Thrive Neurosport. She's a PT that's going through, and she's now studying like the brain injury response and the cognitive motor performance and things like that. She's a PTATC up in Canada who's taken a liking to brain injury, and her information's great. You got, we've both talked with Julie Stam, about her research in youth sports and what the brain looks like, and her books have been great. There's so many valuable resources on, I'm old, so Instagram, actually Twitter, but Instagram. I'm not big onto the old TikTok yet.
You didn't say Facebook, so you're doing okay.
We still do that. That's where
Oh, yeah.
the support groups are. If I could find a MySpace page that would still work, I'd probably go there. But,
That's before my time.
well, we used to message each other on AOL Instant Messenger, so.
That's right. That's right. Soup Junior was my name. My brother was Soup, so I couldn't be Soup.
There you go. I love it. We won't revisit that. There's some embarrassment we won't go through. Question we've added. I don't know, Matt, if we had done this one, but we'll just kind of open this one up. As a professional in your role, how do you take care of yourself? And this will be obviously to both of you.
That's a good question. We haven't talked about that.
No.
And it is something that I do struggle with. I mean, I'm going to be 100% honest. If I have a patient who's not getting better, I take it personal. Like, I'm trying to figure out why in the world this patient's not getting better. So I go home and I'm constantly researching. The link between concussions and demonic possession was brought up in the clinic the other day. So I went down a rabbit hole. Can't really find anything on that yet.
There was a small correlation though, right?
There was a small correlation, but from a personal standpoint, what I do to relax is I spend a lot of time with my kids. When I go home, I am, I'm doing things on social media, I'm researching, I'm trying to build a business, right? So when I go home, it's really hard for me to shut off. But walking through the door, seeing my 3-year-old come running up to me going, hey, Dad, welcome home. Her big thing right now is she likes to play lightsabers with wrapping paper tubes. Can we play lightsabers?
Nice.
We can play lightsabers. For sure we can play lightsabers. And then, we go play in the back room, and my 11-month-old crawls around and chases us around. And like that to me is how I take care of myself. To be able to see that, to spend time with my kids and my wife, and like, this is why I work so hard, because it helps provide better family for them. That's the easiest way that I take care of myself.
Love it. Jalynn?
For me, although, so I had 2 12-week rotations, so really it adds up to about 6 months. And so although it's not like much experience as you guys, looking back now, I know that I'm going to struggle with, like Matt said, shutting off. I love talking to people. I love connecting with people. And that's a huge part of OT too, is just sometimes listening. Same with Matt, like listening to their stories and like advocating and having empathy towards them and stuff. So I know in my future practice, I'm going to have to be the same. I'm going to have to learn, okay, once I leave this place, like leave the hospital, leave the clinic, whatever it may be, like let it go. Like tomorrow's a new day. We'll talk about it then. But I know I'm going to have a hard time shutting off because I would go home and I would sit there and think about these patients, like, why are they not getting better? Or like, or what, how are they right now? Like, what should I have done different while I spent those 45 minutes with them? Or like, what exercises can I do tomorrow? And that's just going to drive me insane. And I don't have kids. I have a dog, and that's about as good as it gets right now for me. So I don't have those distractions to take me away. So when I come home, I could just sit there and research all night. But yeah, shutting off and separating work from life is definitely going to be one of my biggest struggles that I can already tell.
If you could go and change or eliminate one thing surrounding concussion, could be just, the way things, are handled or anything else, what would it be? And that's to both of you. So maybe Jalynn, I'll start with you.
What would I change about concussion?
Yeah, or just like something surrounding it that you've seen that you're just like, if I could just snap my fingers and this was no longer a thing, what would that be?
I think that's a good question. Let me think about it. Matt, you start.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So to me, mine's easy, and this is because I fight with it on a regular basis. It's got to be the narrative behind, if you have a concussion, you should get better quickly, right? Some people do. I mean, you look at the research when we were coming out, it was everybody got better within 10 days. Okay. Yep. Then it shifted to everybody gets better within 10 to 21 days. And then it shifted again and said most people get better within 80 days.
Sure.
Now it's shifting again, saying most people are within 30 days. Now it's like most people get better within 30 to 60 days. But there are some people that don't get better that quickly. To be able to sit down and look at anybody coming in the door going, look, you'll get better. Whether we go back to perfectly normal, whether we go back and make some life adjustments, depending on the severity of the injury, what's going on, everybody gets better, right? They may not be perfect, but they get better. And that's something that if I could change that in an instance, it would be that you're nice to yourself and understanding that, like, look, you're healing. Okay. Healing takes time. Some people get better tomorrow. Some people get better in 10 days.
Yep.
Some people, it's a continual struggle that we got to change some modification, modify some lifestyles and do some things that way. But everybody gets better. I've got a patient that was hit by a car recently, and he's upset that 10 days later, he's still struggling. Like, first of all, dude, you flew 25 feet through the air after getting hit by a car going 40. The landing was the problem. The flight wasn't bad, but the landing was rough. And he doesn't understand why he's not doing better 10 days later. I'm like, first of all, physically, like, you're still banged up. You're bruised everywhere. Like, it, not to mention the brain injury side of things. Like, yeah, you're 10 and a half days now, almost 11 at this point in time. It's like, it's going to take some time, man. We don't bite cars. Like, that's not a thing we do. So if I could change that, it's the narrative around everybody gets better quickly.
I like it. Did you come up with one?
I did.
Perfect.
I would like to change the interdisciplinary approach to concussions, which is obviously, tie together the OT part of it.
Good.
But feeding off, like Matt said, like, you can't know everything. Like, I don't expect him to go into a home and know how to, like, change the environment to make it more safe. I don't expect him to talk about showering and dressing and using the restroom and sexual activity and all that fun stuff. I want to change how we all can feed off of each other and all learn from each other. And like, I can advocate for the ADLs and educate on the importance of like adaptive equipment, assistive technology, and like Matt, and then send them to Matt, and Matt can work on like the vestibular therapy, vision therapy part. Send to PT, and they can work on balance and gait, and all, and then send to speech, and they can work on the cognitive side of it. So I think that is important, and I think that needs to grow, and not just with concussions either, with everything in life, everything in healthcare related. Sometimes I feel like disciplines get I don't know what the word would be, not cocky, but they just feel like they don't need other people. They're like, I can do
very
it.
siloed.
Like, PT's better than OT, OT's better than PT, and that's just not the case. Like, why don't we all work together and focus on the patient rather than like trying to be the best occupation? So
agreed.
Correct.
Last question. What does being a professional that is working with concussion mean to you? I'll take whoever wants to go first on that one, since it's a big question.
So to me, it's to help. Like that's the one thing that it means, is to help. Whether I'm helping the physical side, the mental side, the emotional side, the psychological side, it's to help. I go into every relationship that I can, right? Everybody that comes in to meet me, I want them to leave in a better spot than when they met me, right? Whether it's they're coming into me for an injury, we're going through, it's the initial eval, they're scared, they're nervous, they're confused. I want them to leave that appointment feeling better about their current situation. Some of the therapy I do does not make you feel good, right? That's by design, right? So when we sit here and we talk about it, if a patient physically doesn't feel good leaving, I want them to mentally feel better about their situation.
Sure.
If they're having a rough day, I want them to come in and be able to tell me, hey, look, I'm struggling today. Today's a bad day. I didn't want to get out of bed, but you did. You're here, right? The whole world tries to kick people while they're down. This isn't just medicine, right? This is social media. This is personal people. Like my job is to be better than you. That's not it at all. That's the problem with life, in my opinion, is everybody's trying to be better than everybody else. If I can leave any interaction in my life and you're better off than I am, we're both doing great. So that's, to me, it just means, being a professional that works with concussions, it means that I'm helping.
Then for me, being an OT and working with concussions, I just want to be able to advocate and empathize with patients. So advocate for their needs, advocate whether they're going back to work, whether they're returning to sports, going to school, like struggling with their ADLs, advocating for them. And they're like, I feel like a lot of times they struggle with like family and friends around them. They don't understand, like, oh, you have a concussion, you're fine. Like, go back to work. You're being a baby, all that fun stuff. So advocating, educating to loved ones and friends and stuff, like, hey, yeah, they do have a concussion. It is a real thing, and you need to take them seriously. And then following up with that, empathizing. So I've had concussions, so many. I don't even want to know how many. So being able to sit down with somebody and say, like, hey, I know what you're going through. Like, it may have not been to that extent, but I've been there, and it will be better. It will be okay. So I think that's what working with concussions as an occupational therapist means to me.
Perfect. Just to kind of wrap up then, if people wanted to follow you, connect with you, reach out, what would be the best place? Matt, we'll start with you.
Since I'm old, we do have Facebook. We are the Midwest Concussion Clinic on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at MW Concussion. Our TikTok at MW Concussion is there. Nothing on it, but it's there. And there will eventually be maybe something on there someday. But it's there. So if you follow that, great, fantastic. You can see the logo. But yeah, and then, emailing me with any questions. I'm always a big fan of, like, I'll talk through anything. I do some consulting right now with some patients and some other providers around the area that I'll gladly do it. You can email me at mwconcussion@gmail.com. Really easy to get a hold of me. I also, DMs and all that fun stuff work too.
Not that special yet. I don't have my own special clinic email or anything, but I have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, email, all that fun stuff. And it's just Jalynn Gorman. And then my email would be gormanj@huntington.edu.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for taking the time. Jalynn, I know it took a little bit of prodding to get you on, but I appreciate you joining us and providing the insight.
He threatened my grade.
Yeah. I don't think you were supposed to say that on the recording, but
he also hasn't figured out I have
fair enough. Appreciate you both, and I'm sure we'll be doing a follow-up at some point here in the future.
I appreciate you, Joel.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Athletic Training Chat with Midwest Concussion Clinic. I want to thank both of them for being a part of this, Matt for obviously being on for a third time, but really just talking about this collaboration, what an awesome thing, and really that they both learned so much from each other, and just the importance of everything, and really figuring out where things can be useful. Just awesome thing, and we hope you got as much out of it as we did listening to it. Thank you to Mueller Sports Medicine for teaming up with us on our Through a Lifeline program. As always, any proceeds from you just listening to this and the ads that we have running on it go directly to funding that program. We're over halfway there to getting another one out to an AT that just needs some extra supplies, some basic healthcare ones, pulse ox, blood pressure, some basic emergency ones so they have it in case those situations come up. We appreciate that. If you want to find out more or donate more, head over to clinicallypress.org to find all the information there. Thank you again for listening, and we'll catch you next episode.